Welcome back to the channel. This is Unshackled by Shambhavi, and today I want to talk about why do we have to be reasonable. And before we actually go into the video, when I say reasonable, I mean in terms of idea. Why do we have to be reasonable in our ideas, in our dreams, in what we want, and what we desire? That's all I'm going to talk about. So, as I've done with other stories, I will obviously go through a story, my story at the moment, because that's what resonates with me the most. So, I was up to class 10th, standard 10th, I was a fairly decent student. I was in CBSE, which is relevant for Indians. It was fairly simple, so I was able to manage school, right? And I scored decent in the board exams that we had, and I was expected, just like the overall performance I had, because I was a fairly decent student, I was expected to take up science, and something that is very, very relatable to everybody from India. But I loved biology, but I hated physics. Basically, I hated maths. Maths is something to this day I never understood. But back then it was scarier. I now know as an adult that even without maths you can flourish in life. Maths is not everything. But somehow it was created that kind of situation during school that, oh my God, maths should be there, because it was how my father told me, like, if you learn maths, you'll at least have backup. As if without maths there is nothing you can do in life. Anywho, I don't want to go into the rant of that. But I remember I didn't want to take up science. So then the other acceptable alternative was commerce, but commerce also has a lot of maths into it. You have to do math and economics. In accountancy, it's all maths, just a very don't get me started. So I was very reluctant to take it up, but because when I talked to my father, I was maybe contemplating art, but the thing was, people around me were so averse to art, like it was not even an option. Arts was for people who fail, who are really bad at anything, right? Which is such a bullshit, but okay. And I remember talking to my father saying, Papa, I don't want to take up maths, I can't. Especially knowing that till 10th it was okay, it was manageable. But in 11th and 12th, the volume of the subject, all the subjects it's gonna increase exponentially. So if I knew in my heart that I do not understand math. So to go into something that's that deep and needs you in 11th and 12th especially to have your concepts that clear, you need to have basic understanding, and I did not have, and I really didn't want to take up maths. But my father said to be reasonable and take up maths and commerce so that I have good options in life. Hell if I knew what that options were. I wish I asked that question, but I was a scared little girl, and everybody was talking like that. In fact, even while taking commerce, everybody has questions in their eyes, which was quite insulting, I have to say, because they asked my father that. And my father, he's a teacher, and he's a teacher of commerce. He teaches in a government school. He's now retired, but he used to teach accountancy and business studies and economics sometimes in 11th and 12th in his government school, the state board school. And for people to come up to my father, who they know is a commerce teacher, and to tell them, why are you allowing your daughter to take up commerce, was insulting in itself. For the adults who perpetrate or who always talk about, oh my God, you should respect people, that was pretty disrespectful. I to this day don't know why they said that. And if they did it in my face today, they are in for some real burn. Anywho, let me, I'm going in a different tangent. But I was convinced because I didn't know better. I didn't know that I should be asking questions. I was scared and I didn't want to stand out. And by this time I was kind of used to doing things on my own. So if my father said, I was like, okay, fine, I have to do this. I swear to God, if I'm very proud of who I am today. and I know I am who I am because of the experiences I had. But if I could go back in time, and if not change the situation, at least go and tell that Shambhavi of class 11th and 12th, man, it's gonna be alright, because it those 2 years were the fucking worst year of my life, worst years of my life. And I don't say it lightly. I have lived through anxiety attacks, and I'll still tell you that my 11th and 12th were the worst, because the teachers were a bully. And for the life of me, I couldn't understand it. And it was such a weird situation, because I know I'm a smart person. It's not like I have a difficult time understanding stuff. I knew I was good, but for some reason I was not able to perform. And in hindsight, I don't know, because I don't know maths. It's not my thing. And if I was put in arts, I would have scored way better, even in my sleep. But yeah, I was asked to be reasonable because my father didn't know better. And by this example and others that I have lived through my life, I now know that when someone asks you to be reasonable, it's mostly them telling you to come to their limitation of thoughts and function from there. My father, bless his soul, he didn't want anything bad for me. He wanted the best for me. And for him, he knew that the maths is something important. I don't know if he believed that or he heard from someone else, but that's how these things work. And he, with his best of intentions, gave me that advice, and I took it, and it was such a disaster. Similarly, when I was way younger, probably standard 6th, 7th, I was very into extracurricular studies. I was more interested in sports and music and dance than I ever was in studies. I liked literature, but beyond that, mathematics and science, maybe a little bit of biology. But anything that was objective was not my cup of tea. I liked subjective things. I like subjective things. So I remember I really wanted, dance was something I was able to do, but I really wanted to go into sports. And I had an amazing PE teacher in my school. Actually, there were two of them, and they were both very amazing. And there was a lot of opportunity to go play on, school levels, regional levels, and blah 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 blah. I never thought it as like I wanted to be an athlete or something, but it was just so fascinating. The games, I've always had an interest, and I remember really wanting to, use that opportunity, the platform of my school. And I remember talking to my parents. Sports, dance was fine, because dance was something I could pursue in my school hours, so it was never an issue. But sports needed commitment outside of school hours, and more often than not, it needed us to be there in school before the school started. So I remember my father saying that he cannot take me to the school before hours, not on a regular basis. Once or twice is fine. Basically, he asked me to be beta, be reasonable. You can't keep doing that. I can't keep doing that. And again, I'm not faulting him. He said that he can't do it, which is fair. But I gave up. I could have figured out something else. I could have figured, I don't know, a public transport system that went that early. I could have managed something. I could have convinced my parents to hire someone like an auto wala or a cab person who could drop me off that early. Or we could have talked to someone my school was 12-15 kilometers away, but my father, I could have figured out, I could have made some kind of arrangement with a friend who lived nearer, and my father could drop me off there, because he didn't have to now go 12 kilometers. He could have just gone 5 or 6, dropped me there, and I could have gone with the friend who's also going to the same thing. Basically, my point is, I agreed to be reasonable according to him, and I gave that up. And I regret it so much. It was the golden years of my life. I could have used it, and I could have lived to my heart's extent. I could have been in sports, went to places, won races. It would have been fun. I was a sprinter, and I loved it. And man, I didn't do it. And I couldn't explain why I didn't do it. I knew I wanted to. I knew I'm good at it. And because someone convinced me, otherwise I got convinced. It was the same thing with my dancing. Up till 10th, it was all fine because it was extracurricular. But with 11th and 12th, the kind of pressure it brought academically, I had to give it up. And That was the reasonable thing to do. I shouldn't have. I regret it to this day, and now I'm seeking out a teacher to finish my dance diploma, It's just every time I have been reasonable, I had to give something up. And I don't mean it in physical sense. I had to give a part of me up, which has only, made me unhappier and unhappier, and made me into this person who now lives. Because if someone tells me this is unreasonable, my boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, told me at some point about something being unreasonable, I'll give it up. I became a person who was living by others' rules, and I have been thinking about this the entire day. Why are we so hell-bent on being reasonable? What does that even mean? Reasonable about what? If I want to go take a shit at 2 a.m., that's a very bad example. Chuck it. But if I wanted something and I'm willing to work for it, why is this necessary to be? Why is there a need to be reasonable? If I believe in something, when I got sexually assaulted by my cousin brother, I was young, and I wanted to fight. I wanted to pull that person's hair and everything. But I went to my mother, who said to keep quiet, to be reasonable, it will create a lot of ruckus, don't do it. I kept quiet. And I kept quiet for so many years that after that, when I was eve teased or assaulted by other people, I didn't say anything. I became reasonable in my own abuse. How does that make sense? The thing is, and I fully believe it to this day, being reasonable, again, I'll reiterate, being reasonable is asking someone else to come into your limited worldview and function from that place. Being reasonable has never got me anything or anywhere. If I was reasonable, I would have joined a company, made a decent salary, and would have been married by now with children, if I was reasonable. But by being unreasonable, I was unreasonable when I did startup. I was unreasonable when I did multiple ventures. I was unreasonable when I borrowed money when I was broke. But you know what? Those were the best time in my life. And those were the times where I felt the most alive. Before that, through all the years of being reasonable, I felt like I was underwater. Permanently. I was always underwater, and that was the sensation. And since I have started being unreasonable, creating ruckus, taking up my space, I have suddenly felt I have been more alive. And that's what I'm talking about. That's what this channel is about. That in no way, in no version, in no situation, being anything other than who you are, what your truth is, who you are from your inside, what your instinct tells you, what you feel like, what you want from life, from universe, can be the wrong thing. If you can recognize who you are, what your essence is, who do you think you are inside, you can look at it as your inner child, you can look at it in any particular way. I don't care how you understand it. You can understand it in your own language and your own perception. But what I am saying is that if you're true to yourself, it's never the wrong thing. Do you know even one person in the world who is successful in any level, like with fame, money, innovation, in whatever field, in whatever ways, in whatever parameters they are successful? Do you know anyone who has reached success by being reasonable? I bet you can't. So the conclusion is, being reasonable gets you nowhere. And being reasonable is a very vague definition of what society expects you to be. And it changes with time, with people, with context. My parents told me they were liberal, so they let me study wherever, whatever. But in return, they expected me to listen to them. That's not being liberal. If you are giving freedom to someone, it can't be given in spades. You either give them the freedom, you either genuinely believe that they are free to do their own shit, or you don't. This kind of negotiation doesn't work, So that's what I'm saying. Sorry, I just lost the track. Yeah, being reasonable has gotten me nowhere. Ever, in any situation. I was reasonable in my relationships and I got used by all of them. To no fault of their own, I was pretending to be something I was not. which is why I felt used, because I wasn't saying what I wanted, because I felt like, okay, me being reasonable would mean staying silent. Me being reasonable is not demanding, which is not who I am. I deserve what I want. Why won't I? I'm not here in this world to be reasonable. I'm not going to be. I'm just going to stay in my truth, and that's the only guiding thing. Anybody who comes and tells me to be reasonable, it's bullshit. Don't believe it. I don't.